Over time, I've gotten a lot of these mini pedals, some distortion, some tuner, some delay, and I built this plywood base for it at some point, but the pedals don't stay down very well. I thought I'd build something more permanent and something that allows the pedals to mount more securely. My first insight was most pedal boards have slats that run horizontally, but these mini pedals, they're all the same width, so I could build it with slats that run vertically and tie wrap the pedals down, and that would make it very secure. So I spent a couple of hours at the kitchen table sketching out the right size. I ended up with a configuration of 4 pedals on the bottom row and 3 pedals on the top row. Then I raided the scrap wood bin. I wanted to use up a lot of the hardwood scraps I had from some guitar projects. You can see here I'm taking some walnut that I had from a bass build long ago and cutting some strips about 3/4 of an inch wide. And in the next shot I do the same with some maple scrap, cut to the same length. And we're going to laminate these kind of like a butcher block, like a cutting board. Here you can see I'm laminating the pieces together. This is the lower level of the pedal board. I did a similar thing for the upper level, which is a little bit smaller. Once all of the glue was dry, I needed to flatten the faces. I started with my planer, but it jammed up. The piece was just a little bit too wide for it. So then I got out the flattening jig. This is a pretty standard flattening jig where a router runs on rails and you move it back and forth and slowly flatten the entire surface to the same level. I also got to have a nice side quest in sharpening router bits, since my router bits were dull. Once it was all flattened, gave it a quick sand, brought it over to the table saw sled, and evened up the edges. Next step was to form the slots where the cables and the tie wraps will all go into. There are a couple of different ways to do this. What I decided to do was use a Forstner bit to put large holes at the end, and then I cut with a jigsaw to connect those holes. This is one of the fun parts of woodworking, is there are multiple ways to do the same task. If I had to do this one again, I probably just would have made a template in that oval shape and just used a router from start to finish. That would have ended up with cleaner edges. You can see I'm using a straight edge here to really clean out that hole. And also using the handheld router here to round over the edges. A lot of my projects are designed on the fly, and this was certainly the case here. At the last minute I decided to incorporate a battery pack so that this pedal board didn't have to be plugged in all the time. Problem was I didn't really plan for a space for that. So what I did was route a small ledge in the bottom of the board, and this actually caused a lot of headaches later trying to get the cables to route around this battery pack. I'm glad I included it, but it could have been planned better. Once the lower portion and the upper portion are ready, you spread out some wood glue, clamp them together to make a single board. Again, we'll have 4 pedals in the front layer, 3 pedals on the upper layer. Once that dries, we're back over at the sled to even up the edges. And we use a pattern bit in the router to follow the holes from the upper layer all the way through the bottom layer. And then it was a lot of sanding. This project took a lot longer than I expected because there are so many rounded edges on this tiny piece of wood. I got this little finger sander as a new tool. That helped quite a bit, but it still didn't reduce too much of the finger sanding. So this was about half of a football game's worth of hand sanding to get all the little corners at all of the different grits of sandpaper. I certainly made it more complicated than it needed to be. This is True Oil. This is the first coat. Spreading it on there. It's always nice to see the grain pop out as you spread it, especially the flame and the maple on that upper level. It was some nice wood. You can see the flame in that centerpiece. I put 2 layers of True Oil on, and then I started to work on the feet. The back feet are just screwed directly to the backboard. The front feet I wanted to inset a bit, so as you saw before, I inset those using a large Forstner bit. That gives it a little bit of a lean, so the front is slightly lower than the back. And finally, it was time for assembly. To decide on the order of the pedals, to run power through the hole to each of the pedals, and to strap them down with a tie wrap. These hold pretty securely, and if I ever change a pedal out, it's a pretty quick task to just cut off the tie wrap. Overall, the tie wraps worked really well. One issue was that I couldn't put the tie wraps through where the battery pack was on the bottom. Again, some planning could have helped this out. So I screwed in some small attachment points in the side of the hole and tie wrapped to those. If I ever did another one of these, I could certainly plan around that. And finally, a little bit of cleanup on the bottom. There are a lot of cables, power cables, instrument cables running around on the back of this. So I screwed in some tie-down points and cleaned it all up with tie wraps. And here's the final product, sitting in front of my console guitar amp that I made in the last video. I like it a lot. It looks very clean. Just has an input cable going in and an output cable coming out. The battery pack's hidden up underneath. Don't even need to run power to it. I'll just charge it every week or so. And the tie wraps in particular really hold everything down. That's it. Hope you enjoyed.